When I first stood on the Ponte Vecchio in Florence, watching the Arno River flow beneath my feet, I thought I understood what I was looking at. A medieval bridge, stone arches, a testament to Renaissance engineering. That's what every guidebook told me. That's what every historian claimed. But then I noticed something that didn't make sense. Something that would send me down a rabbit hole so deep, I'm still trying to find the bottom. The bridge had survived the flood of 1966, the worst flood in Florence's recorded history. Water rose 20 feet in a single night. Cars were swept away like toys. Buildings collapsed. Modern infrastructure crumbled. Entire neighborhoods were destroyed. But the Ponte Vecchio, built supposedly in 1345, didn't just survive. It barely noticed. No structural damage, no foundation erosion, no cracks in the ancient stone. While 20th century concrete bridges upstream were torn apart, this 600-year-old structure stood there like it was annoyed by the inconvenience. That's when I started asking the question no one seems to want to answer. How is that possible? And more importantly, what else are these old bridges hiding? I spent the next 2 years traveling across Europe, France, Spain, Czech Republic, Turkey, back to Italy. Every city with an old bridge, every river with ancient stone arches. And what I found wasn't just surprising, it was impossible. Because the pattern repeated itself over and over and over again. The oldest bridges, the ones we're told, were built with primitive tools and medieval knowledge, survive catastrophic floods that destroy everything modern engineering can create. Bridges built in the 1400s withstand forces that collapse structures built in the 1900s. Stone arches designed supposedly by monks with hammers and chisels outlast steel and concrete marvels designed by computers. It makes no sense, unless everything we've been taught about these bridges is wrong. Let me take you to Prague. The Charles Bridge, built officially in 1357 by Charles IV, Holy Roman Emperor. Except when you dig into the actual records, things get murky fast. The construction documents are vague. The architect, Peter Parler, is credited with the design, but the engineering specifications, missing. The foundation blueprints don't exist. The techniques used to sink pylons into a fast-moving river using 14th century technology, completely undocumented. But here's what we do know. In 1890, Prague experienced a flood so severe it destroyed every modern bridge across the Vltava River. Every single one. Bridges built with industrial-age steel. Bridges designed by trained engineers with access to calculations and material science that medieval monks couldn't have dreamed of. All of them failed, swept away, torn from their foundations. Except the Charles Bridge, 600 years old, stone, hand-carved supposedly. It didn't move, it didn't crack. It stood there while newer, stronger, scientifically designed bridges were ripped apart like paper. How? That's the question that haunted me. So I started looking at the bridge itself, not as a tourist, but as someone searching for answers. And that's when I saw it, the foundation depth. The Charles Bridge pylons are sunk impossibly deep into the riverbed, far deeper than any medieval technology could achieve. We're talking about stone pillars driven 30, 40, even 50 feet down into bedrock, underwater, in a fast-flowing river, using nothing but rope and wooden scaffolding, according to the official story. Except there's a problem. Modern engineers, with hydraulic drills and cofferdams and diesel pumps, struggle to sink foundations that deep in moving water. It takes months of work, millions of dollars in equipment, and even then it's considered one of the most challenging engineering tasks you can attempt. But somehow, in 1357, with medieval tools, they did it. Not once, not twice, 16 times, one for each pylon, each one perfectly aligned, each one sunk to the exact same depth, each one positioned with mathematical precision to distribute weight across the river's natural stress points. The official explanation is that they used egg yolks mixed with mortar to make it stronger. I'm not joking. That's the actual historical claim. Egg yolks. As if protein in mortar explains how you sink 50-foot stone pillars into a riverbed using 14th century technology. But it gets stranger, because the Charles Bridge isn't unique. It's the pattern, the rule, not the exception. In France, the Pont du Gard, built supposedly by the Romans in the 1st century AD, except the Romans themselves barely documented it. No architect's name, no construction records, no engineering notes, just a massive 3-tiered aqueduct bridge spanning a gorge, built with stone blocks weighing up to 6 tons each, fitted together with such precision you can't slide a knife blade between them, standing for 2,000 years without mortar, without steel reinforcement, without any of the technology we consider essential for modern bridge building. And here's the part that breaks your brain. In 2002, southern France experienced catastrophic flooding. Modern bridges failed. Concrete structures built in the 1960s collapsed. Steel bridges from the 1980s were damaged beyond repair. But the Pont du Gard, 2,000 years old, stone blocks held together by gravity and geometry. Not a crack, not a shift, not even minor erosion. As if it was designed by people who understood forces and water dynamics in ways we've completely forgotten. I started collecting data, flood records, bridge failures, structural reports. What I found was a pattern so consistent it couldn't be coincidence. In every major European flood over the past 300 years, modern bridges failed at exponentially higher rates than ancient ones. In the 1910 Paris floods, every steel bridge across the Seine required major repairs or replacement. But the Pont Neuf, built in 1578, stood without damage. In the 2013 German floods, dozens of modern bridges collapsed, but the medieval stone bridges in Regensburg, some dating back to the 1100s, survived without intervention. It's not just survival, it's superiority. These ancient bridges perform better under stress than anything we build today, and no one talks about it. No engineering journal addresses it. No historian explains it. It's just quietly ignored, as if acknowledging it would force us to confront something we're not ready to face. That these bridges weren't built by the people we credit them to. That the technology used to create them was far more advanced than the official timeline allows. That maybe, just maybe, we inherited these structures from a civilization that understood water, stone, pressure, and geometry in ways that make our modern engineering look like kindergarten mathematics. Let me take you to Istanbul, the Valens Aqueduct, built supposedly in 368 AD by the Roman Emperor Valens, a massive stone bridge aqueduct stretching across the city, carrying water from reservoirs miles away. It survived earthquakes, multiple ones. Earthquakes that leveled entire neighborhoods, that destroyed mosques built 1,000 years later, that crumbled modern buildings like sandcastles. But the Valens Aqueduct stands, still functional, still carrying the weight of its own impossible design. And when you examine the construction, nothing makes sense. The arches are double-tiered. The lower arches support the upper arches in a configuration that shouldn't work according to basic physics. The weight distribution is all wrong, or at least it should be wrong, except it isn't, because somehow, whoever designed this understood load-bearing dynamics so precisely that they created a structure that becomes stronger under pressure. The more weight you add, the more stable it gets. The more water flows through it, the more the entire system compresses and locks into place. Modern engineers call it a mathematical impossibility, except it's standing right there, has been for 1700 years, surviving everything nature and human warfare could throw at it. I started finding the same engineering principles in bridge after bridge. The Rialto Bridge in Venice, the Sayo Sepol Bridge in Isfahan, the Kaju Bridge in Iran, the Alcantara Bridge in Spain. All of them supposedly built centuries apart, in different cultures, by different civilizations. And yet, all of them use the same impossible techniques. Foundations sunk deeper than the technology of the era should allow. Stone blocks fitted with precision that requires modern laser cutting. Arches designed with mathematical ratios that weren't officially discovered until hundreds of years after the bridges were built. Weight distribution systems that seem to violate basic Newtonian physics but work perfectly anyway. And all of them survive floods that destroy modern bridges. Every single time. I found a report from the 1970s, an engineering survey commissioned by UNESCO to study why medieval bridges outlasted modern ones. The team included structural engineers, geologists, historians, architects. They examined dozens of ancient bridges across Europe and the Middle East. Their conclusion? The construction techniques used were so advanced that modern engineering couldn't replicate them. Not couldn't afford to. Couldn't. As in, we don't know how. The report was published once in an obscure academic journal and then quietly disappeared. I found a single copy in a university archive in Belgium. Most of it was technical analysis, stress calculations, material science, but buried in the appendices was a section that made my hands shake as I read it. The engineers admitted they couldn't explain the foundation depths. They couldn't explain the precision of the stone cutting. They couldn't explain how structures built without steel reinforcement outperformed structures built with it. And most disturbing of all, they found evidence that many of these bridges were built on top of even older foundations. Foundations that went down impossibly deep. Foundations that predated the civilizations we credit with building the bridges. The report's final line haunted me. Quote, "Further investigation required, though funding and academic support unlikely given implications of findings." End quote. That was 1974. As far as I can tell, no further investigation was ever conducted. The questions were asked, the impossibilities documented, and then everyone just moved on, as if looking deeper might reveal something we're not supposed to know. But I kept looking. I went to the bridges themselves, spent hours underneath them, examining the foundations, the water flow patterns, the way erosion affected different sections, and I started noticing details that photographs don't capture. Underneath almost every ancient bridge, there are channels, water channels carved into the riverbed, directing flow away from the pylons. Channels cut with such precision that water moves around the foundations rather than against them. Modern bridges fight the river. These ancient bridges work with it. They use the water's own force to stabilize themselves. It's a principle called hydrodynamic equilibrium. We only officially discovered it in the late 20th century. It requires complex computer modeling to implement correctly. And yet, these bridges, supposedly built 1,000 years ago, incorporate it perfectly, as if the designers understood fluid dynamics at a level we're only beginning to grasp now. In Turkey, I found a bridge that's not on any tourist map, not famous, not protected, just an old stone bridge crossing a river in the countryside. Local villagers call it the Devil's Bridge, though they can't tell you why. The name just exists, passed down through generations. I spent 3 days there, watching the water, studying the structure. On the second day, I noticed something carved into one of the foundation stones. Symbols, not decorative, not random. Mathematical symbols, geometric ratios, diagrams showing water pressure distribution, carved into stone that supposedly predates the mathematical notation system needed to understand what the symbols represent. I took photographs, sent them to engineers, mathematicians, historians. Most ignored me. One responded, a retired professor of civil engineering from MIT. He looked at the symbols for 2 weeks before he called me. His voice was shaking. He said, whoever carved these understood resonance harmonics. They understood how water creates pressure waves in stone. They understood principles we only discovered in the 1960s. This shouldn't exist. I asked him what it meant. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, it means someone was here before us, someone who knew more than we do, and for some reason we forgot, or we were made to forget. That conversation changed everything, because once you see it, once you understand that these bridges are evidence of knowledge we're not supposed to have, you start seeing it everywhere. The flood survival isn't luck, it's design. The impossibly deep foundations aren't medieval determination. They're technology, advanced technology. Technology that works so well it's still working 1,000 years later, while our modern equivalents fail after 50 years. And the most terrifying part? We're losing them. Not to time, to renovation. In the last 50 years, dozens of ancient bridges have been demolished and replaced with modern versions. The official reason is always the same: structural concerns, safety upgrades, traffic capacity. But when you look at the bridges being destroyed, they're the ones that survived everything. Floods, earthquakes, wars. They're standing, functional, stronger than the replacements we're building. And yet they're being torn down anyway. Why? Why replace a structure that works with one that we know will fail faster? Unless the goal isn't improvement, unless the goal is erasure, removal of evidence, destruction of proof that we didn't build these, that we inherited them, that someone came before us who understood the natural world in ways we've been deliberately separated from. I think about the Charles Bridge in Prague, still standing, still perfect, 600 years old officially. But what if it's older? What if Peter Parler didn't build it? What if he restored it, maintained it? What if the bridge was already there, already ancient, already impossibly well designed, and all he did was take credit for maintenance work? What if all these bridges are Tartarian? Part of that lost civilization, that advanced culture that built structures in harmony with nature instead of in opposition to it. Structures that used water, stone, geometry, and resonance to create buildings that become stronger over time instead of weaker. What if the bridges are the proof, the undeniable evidence, standing in plain sight, surviving every flood, outlasting everything we build, silently testifying to a truth we're not allowed to speak? I don't have all the answers. I don't even have most of them. But I have questions that no one will address. I have evidence that keeps getting ignored. And I have a growing certainty that these bridges are trying to tell us something. Something about who we are, about who came before us, about what we lost, about what was taken from us. Because if a bridge built in 1357 survives a flood that destroys a bridge built in 1957, one of two things is true. Either we've gotten worse at engineering over 600 years, which makes no sense, or the bridge from 1357 wasn't actually built in 1357. It was built earlier, much earlier, by people who knew things we've forgotten, or never knew. And everything we've been taught about history, about progress, about human development, is a carefully constructed lie designed to hide one simple, devastating truth. We're not the pinnacle of civilization. We're the remnants. We're what's left after the real builders disappeared. We're children playing in the ruins of giants, pretending we built the castles ourselves, too proud or too terrified to admit that someone else was here first. Someone better, someone who understood this world in ways we may never recover. The bridges remember, even if we don't. They stand there, crossing rivers, bearing weight, surviving floods, waiting for someone to finally ask the right questions, to finally look closely enough to see what's been hidden in plain sight for centuries. I've asked the questions, I've looked, and what I've seen has changed everything I thought I knew about history, about engineering, about us. The only question left is whether you're ready to see it too, because once you do, you can't go back. You can't unsee the evidence. You can't ignore the pattern. You can't pretend these bridges are just old rocks piled together by medieval labourers with good luck. They're proof, standing, waiting, surviving everything we throw at nature and everything nature throws at us. Bridges that shouldn't exist. Bridges that mock our modern hubris. Bridges that whisper secrets from a civilization we erased from every textbook but couldn't erase from the earth itself. The Tartarian bridges, still standing, still perfect, still impossible, and still somehow ignored by everyone who should be demanding answers, but not by me, not anymore, and if you've made it this far, not by you either.